To the outside world, she's the perfect mother-in-law, but behind closed doors, she turned my pregnancy into a living hell in the blink of an eye. Even with my husband's support, the moment I overheard her on the phone, spewing vile accusations about my mother and mocking my so-called broken home, I realised that the woman I've known for 4 years was nothing but a facade. Now trapped under the same roof with a monster hiding behind a smile, I'm left wondering, can I really save my unborn child and my career from this toxic nightmare? But the questions remain. Why is a so-called modern educated woman treating her own daughter-in-law with such two-faced cruelty? How did this vindictive side stay hidden during the 4 years we knew each other before marriage? Where did I miss the signs? Battling mental abuse during a high-risk pregnancy, how does one woman find the strength to fight for her baby and her bar exam simultaneously? And where does it end? Will this conflict tear the marriage apart, or will she find a way to forge her own path? In today's episode, we're diving into this chilling, true story. I'm your host, Sneha. Stay with us as we uncover the full details. And they say the devil doesn't show up with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes the devil shows up with a warm pumpkin pie, a vintage bottle of Cabernet, and a smile that makes you feel like you've finally come home. That was the trap. That was how it started. I'm standing in the guest bedroom right now. Well, what used to be the guest bedroom and is now my temporary prison. Staring out the window at the manicured lawn of a quiet suburb in Connecticut. It's raining, the kind of grey, relentless drizzle that seeps into your bones. My hand rests instinctively on my stomach. 5 months. My baby is the size of a large heirloom tomato today. According to the app on my phone, I should be happy. I should be glowing. I should be studying for the bar exam, which is looming over my head like a guillotine. But instead, I am standing here, afraid to go downstairs to get a glass of water. Afraid to make a sound. How did I get here? If you had asked me that question 6 months ago, the answer would have been a fairy tale. I met Mark 4 years ago at a coffee shop near the law school library. He was charming, steady, the kind of guy who opens doors and actually listens when you talk. We fell into that easy, comfortable kind of love, the kind that feels safe. But the real selling point, it wasn't just Mark, it was his family, or rather the picture-perfect image of his family. Coming from where I come from, family was a complicated word. I was raised by a single mother, a warrior of a woman who worked double shifts at a diner, smelling like grease and cheap coffee, just to make sure I had textbooks and shoes that fit. We didn't have Thanksgiving dinners with 20 people around a mahogany table. We had takeout pizza and each other. My mother was my superhero, but our life was a constant battle for survival. I grew up with a chip on my shoulder and a fire in my belly, determined to become a lawyer, to change our narrative. But deep down, I craved the stability I saw in movies, and Mark's mother, Evelyn, she offered me that on a silver platter. I remember the first Thanksgiving I spent at this house, the very house I'm trapped in now. It was magnificent. The driveway was swept clean of leaves. The wreath on the door was tasteful. And the smell of roasted turkey hit you the moment you stepped onto the porch. Evelyn opened the door with open arm. She didn't look like the mother of a 30-year-old man. She looked timeless. Impeccably dressed in cashmere, hair perfectly coiffed. "You must be the girl who stole my son's heart," she had said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and vanilla. For 4 years, that was the narrative. I was the beloved girlfriend, then the cherished fiancée. I spent Christmases here, I spent Easters here. Evelyn would brag about me to her friends. She's in law school, you know, top of her class. She made me feel seen. She made me feel worthy. In fact, she praised it. "You're a survivor, honey," she'd say, pouring me a glass of wine. I swallowed it all, hook, line and sinker. So when Mark and I got married and the conversation about money came up, it seemed like the most logical solution in the world. We were living in a cramped apartment in the city, paying an exorbitant amount of rent that was eating into our savings. I was about to graduate and face the bar exam, a brutal, months-long process where I couldn't work. We wanted to buy a house, but the market was insane. We needed a down payment. Evelyn had suggested it over Sunday brunch. Casually, as she buttered a scone. "We have so much space. The entire upstairs is empty. You can save for the down payment, focus on your exam." And she looked at my barely there bump with misty eyes. I can help. I can take care of the cooking, the cleaning. You just study and rest. Mark looked at me, his eyes lighting up. It makes sense, babe. Just for a year, we could save 50 grand. Easy. I hesitated just for a second. My own mother, back in her small apartment, had been quiet when I told her. 2 women in one kitchen, sweetheart. It's tricky, she had warned. But I brushed her off. I thought she was just being protective. I thought she didn't understand that Evelyn wasn't like other mothers-in-law. Evelyn was cool. Evelyn was modern. So we moved in. The first week was a whirlwind of boxes and excitement. Mark and I took the large master suite on the 2nd floor. I set up my study desk by the window, stacking my thick law books, torts, contracts, criminal law, in neat piles. I felt empowered. I felt supported. This is going to be great, Mark whispered to me that first night, kissing my forehead. But the shift didn't happen with a bang. It happened in whispers. It happened in the silence between the noise. It started about 3 weeks in. I was in the zone. Deep into a practice exam on constitutional law, my brain was frying. I hadn't showered yet. My hair was in a messy bun, and I was wearing oversized sweatpants. I went downstairs at 11 o'clock a.m. to grab a coffee. The kitchen was pristine, not a crumb on the counter. The sunlight streamed in, highlighting the dust-free surfaces. Evelyn was there arranging flowers in a crystal vase. "Good morning, Evelyn," I said, suppressing a yawn, reaching for the coffee pot. She turned. Her smile was there, pasted on, but her eyes, they did a slow vertical scan of my body, from my messy hair down to my mismatched socks. It lasted only a second, but it felt like a physical touch, a cold one. "Good morning, dear," she said. Her voice was light, airy. "Yeah, studying hard," I poured the coffee. She hummed, turning back to her flowers, snipping a stem with a sharp snip. "You know, Sharon's daughter-in-law just passed the bar. She managed to keep the house spotless while doing it too." I froze. The mug stopped halfway to my mouth. It was said so casually, so innocently. If you wrote it down on paper, it looked like a compliment to Sharon's daughter-in-law. But the tone, the context, it was a dart thrown with surgical precision. I laughed, a little awkwardly. "Well, she's a superhero then." Evelyn didn't laugh. She just snipped another flower. "Snip? I suppose," she said softly. "Although Mark was looking for his blue shirt this morning. He couldn't find it." I felt a flush of heat rise to my cheeks. "Oh, I didn't get to the laundry yesterday." She turned around then, wiping her hands on a towel. She walked over to me, and for a second, I thought she was going to hug me. She reached out, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and smiled. "Don't worry, honey," she cooed. "I know you're different. You're not used to running a household like this. It's a lot of work to keep things civilized. I'll handle Mark's laundry from now on." "Little books." The words hung in the air. I looked at her, searching for malice, but her face was a mask of benevolent concern. She patted my cheek and walked out of the kitchen, leaving the scent of vanilla and something sharp, like bleach, in her wake. I stood there, gripping my coffee mug, my heart rate slightly elevated. Am I overreacting? I thought. She's helping. She's offering to do the laundry. Why does it feel like I just got slapped? That night when Mark came home, I mentioned it. "Your mum made a weird comment today," I said as we got into bed. Mark asked, scrolling through his phone. Wait, Mark chuckled. "Babe, you're hormonal. Mum loves you. She probably just meant she wants to help. She knows how stressed you are. Let her do the laundry." "Right," I whispered. But it wasn't one less thing. It was the beginning of the erosion. Over the next month, the help became a weapon. If I washed the dishes, I'd find them rewashed in the drying rack an hour later. If I asked why, she'd say, "Oh, there were just some spots, honey." If I tried to cook, she would hover. "Are you using that much oil? Mark's cholesterol is a bit high." But oh, never mind, you cook it your way. Slowly, systematically, she was stripping me of my competence. She was painting a picture of me as the messy, incapable charity case she had graciously taken in. But the real horror wasn't the housework, it was the silence. When Mark was home, the house was filled with music and chatter. Evelyn was vibrant, engaging me in conversations about politics and news. But the moment his car pulled out of the driveway in the morning, the house died. She would stop talking to me. Literally, I would walk into a room and she would pick up her phone and start scrolling. If I asked a question, I'd get a one-word answer. It was like living with a ghost who only materialised when there was an audience. And then came the day I realised that the ghost had a voice. And that voice was telling stories. It was a Tuesday. I had a migraine, probably from the stress and the pregnancy hormones. I decided to take a nap in the afternoon. I went to the guest room, my room, and lay down. The heating vent in the floor of that room connects directly to the kitchen below. It's an old house. Sound travels through the ducts like a secret message. I was drifting off when I heard the phone ring downstairs. Evelyn's voice boomed. Cheerful, animated. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out. "Oh, you know how it is," she continued. "Busy, very busy." My eyes snapped open. No, I don't mind helping," Evelyn sighed, a sound of heavy, martyred exhaustion. "But honestly, Janice, I didn't expect it to be this bad. The girl does nothing." I held my breath. My heart started hammering against my ribs. "I mean, I get that she's studying." Evelyn's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, but it echoed clearly through the vent. "But you should see the state of their room. It smells." "And personal hygiene." Tears pricked my eyes. "It smells." I showered every day. I was obsessive about cleanliness. What was she talking about? "Well," Evelyn laughed, "a cruel, cold sound." "What do you expect? Look where she comes from. Her mother raised her in a one-room apartment. They don't know how to keep a proper home. It's not her fault she wasn't raised with standards." The air left my lungs. It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. She wasn't just complaining about dishes. She was attacking my DNA. She was attacking my mother, the woman who worked her fingers to the bone to make me who I am. "I just hope Mark realises it before it's too late," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. I lay there, frozen. My hands were shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists. Downstairs, the kettle whistled. The conversation shifted to church gossip, but up here in the silence of my room, the world had just tilted on its axis. The loving mother-in-law was dead. The woman downstairs was a stranger who hated me, a stranger who was methodically dismantling my reputation to everyone in town while I sat upstairs, studying for a future she clearly didn't believe I deserved. I heard the front door open. Mark was home early. "Mum?" His voice rang out, happy and oblivious. Evelyn called out. Her voice instantly shifted from venomous gossip to sugary warmth. I lay in bed, listening to his footsteps coming up the stairs. "My husband, the man who brought me here." He opened the door, a smile on his face. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty. Mum says she made cookies." I looked at him. I looked at the man who thought we were living in paradise. And for the first time, I felt a surge of terrifying clarity. He doesn't know. He has no idea. And if I tell him, will he believe me? Or will he believe the woman who has spent 30 years perfecting the act of being the perfect mother? I forced a smile. It felt heavy, like wet clay. "Maybe later," I whispered. As Mark went back downstairs, leaving the door slightly ajar, I heard Evelyn's laugh float up from the kitchen. It sounded different now. It sounded like a lock clicking shut. I am trapped, and I have a feeling this is only the beginning. Knowing the truth is a heavy thing to carry. It sits in your gut like a stone. After overhearing that phone call, after hearing Evelyn dismantle my character to her friend Janice, I didn't pack my bags. I didn't scream. I didn't storm downstairs and confront her. Why? Because I'm a lawyer in training. And lawyers know one thing. You don't go to trial without evidence. You don't make a move until you can win. So I stayed. I walked downstairs that evening for dinner and I smiled. I looked into the eyes of the woman who had called me a broken girl from a broken family, and I passed her the salt. But the dynamic had shifted. The air in the house had changed from comfortable to suffocating. I decided I needed to prove her wrong. If her narrative was that I was lazy, that I was a stray cat who didn't know how to keep a home, I was going to shatter that image. I would be the perfect wife, the perfect guest, and the perfect student, all while growing a human being inside me. The next morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock a.m. Mark was still snoring softly beside me. My back ached, a dull throb that radiated down my legs, but I ignored it. I went downstairs, determined to make a full breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, fresh coffee, the works. I wanted Mark to wake up to the smell of his wife taking care of him. I wanted Evelyn to walk into my kitchen. I was halfway through whisking the batter when I heard the soft click of heels on the hardwood floor. Evelyn stood in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. Her face was bare, but somehow she still looked polished. She stared at the whisk in my hand like I was holding a weapon. Elena, I'm making breakfast, I said, keeping my voice bright. Evelyn walked over. She didn't attack. She didn't scold. She swarmed. Oh, honey, that is so sweet. She cooed, reaching out and placing her hand over mine, effectively stopping the whisk. Her hand was cold. But look at you. You have dark circles under your eyes. I'm fine, Evelyn, really. I know you do, and it's adorable, she said, gently prying the bowl from my grip. But the doctor said you need to minimise stress. Standing over a hot stove, dealing with grease splatters? Absolutely not. Evelyn, please. She smiled, a tight, pitying expression. And I want a healthy grandchild. Now go sit down. I'll finish this. Go on. She physically ushered me to a stool at the island. I sat there feeling like a reprimanded child. Watching her take over, she added vanilla to the batter. My batter. She turned up the heat on the griddle. She hummed a tune while she worked, completely ignoring the fact that I was sitting 3 feet away. When Mark came down 20 minutes later, the table was set. Mark rubbed his hands together. Smells amazing in here. He looked at me. Before I could open my mouth, Evelyn turned from the stove, flipping a perfect pancake. She tried, poor thing, Evelyn laughed lightly. She was up so early, rattling around. Mark smiled at his mother. You're the best, Mum, seriously. He looked at me with adoration, but the credit had been stolen. It had been twisted. In Mark's eyes, I was the fragile vessel that needed protecting, and Evelyn was the saviour. I ate the pancakes in silence. They tasted like ash. 2 days later, I tried again. This time, I was strategic. Evelyn had a bridge club meeting in the afternoon. I knew the house would be empty for at least 3 hours. I put my books away, constitutional law could wait, and went to the grocery store. I bought expensive ingredients, fresh basil, pine nuts, heavy cream, organic chicken. I was going to make my signature pesto chicken pasta. It was the dish Mark said he fell in love with me over on our 3rd date. I spent 2 hours chopping, sautéing and seasoning. The kitchen smelled like heaven, garlic, butter and herbs. I was in my element. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself. I wasn't the pregnant incubator. I was Eleanor. I had just put the dish in the oven to bake when the front door opened. Evelyn was back early. My stomach dropped. She walked into the kitchen, dropping her purse on the counter. She sniffed the air. Garlic, she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I made dinner, I said proudly, wiping my hands on a towel. Pesto chicken. Evelyn walked over to the oven and turned on the light. She peered inside, then she looked at the sink where a few pots and pans were soaking. I see, she said. She walked over to the sink and picked up a pan. You know, we have a dishwasher, Elena. I was going to load it while the chicken bakes. I defended myself as she fanned her nose. It's very pungent. Mark has had heartburn lately. It's the recipe he loves, Evelyn sighed, a long, suffering sigh. Well, he used to love it, but people's tastes change as they mature, dear. He prefers lighter meals now, but it's done. She made me feel like I had just served poison, but the real blow came at dinner. We sat down, I served the pasta. I watched Mark take the first bite, holding my breath. Oh man, Mark groaned. I beamed. I'm glad you... But Evelyn interjected, her voice sharp. Is it a bit salty? She put her fork down, looking concerned. Mark, what's your blood pressure? Mark paused. He chewed slowly. The power of suggestion is a terrifying thing. I saw doubt creep into his eyes. Mark shrugged, taking another bite. I'm sure it is, Evelyn said, pushing her plate away. I'll just have a salad. Elena, honey, next time, maybe let me season it. She didn't eat it. She sat there, picking at a lettuce leaf, watching us eat. It destroyed the meal. Mark stopped eating halfway through, claiming he was full, though I knew he wasn't. Later that night, as I was loading the dishwasher because Evelyn had suddenly developed a wrist ache, she came up behind me. You really should focus on your studies, she whispered. You're not very good at this domestic stuff, are you? Leave the kitchen to me. You stick to your books. That's what you're good at. It sounded like advice. It felt like a threat. Stay in your lane. This is my territory. But the problem was she didn't let me stay in my lane either. The bar exam was my only ticket out. I knew that once I passed, I could get a job, we could get a mortgage and we could leave. Evelyn knew it too. I am convinced she knew it. Because she started a war on my concentration. It was subtle. It was passive-aggressive, turned into an art form. I would close the door to the guest room to study. 10 minutes later, knock, knock, knock. Elena, just checking if you want some herbal tea. No thanks, Evelyn. 20 minutes later, the vacuum cleaner roaring directly outside my door, back and forth. For 30 minutes, I would put on noise-cancelling headphones. Then the door would open. She wouldn't knock this time. She'd just walk in with a basket of laundry. She'd exclaim, feigning surprise when I jumped. "I just needed to put these towels away in the closet here. Carry on." She would spend 10 minutes folding 3 towels, humming, asking me questions about the baby's nursery, about names, about diapers. "Evelyn, I really need to focus." She would stop folding. She would look at me with big, sad eyes. "I'm just excited, Elena. I'm just trying to bond. You're always so closed off." "Is it the hormones? You seem so aggressive." I was sitting in a chair, reading a book. She was the one invading my space, but somehow I was the aggressor. "I'm sorry," I would end up apologising. She would pause, tilting her head. "Maybe you should postpone the exam until after the baby is born. It seems like too much for you. You're not handling the pressure well." I looked down at my hands. I was shaking, but not from the exam, from rage, from the adrenaline of being hunted in my own home. "I'm not postponing it," I said firmly. "Suit yourself," she said, dropping a towel on the bed. "I just don't want you to fail." It would be so embarrassing for Mark. She walked out, leaving the door wide open. But the breaking point, the moment I knew this wasn't just annoyance, but actual danger, happened 3 days ago. I had been studying for 6 hours straight. I was exhausted. I went downstairs to get a glass of water. The house was quiet. Evelyn was in the living room watching TV. I walked into the kitchen and saw my prenatal vitamins on the counter. I realised I hadn't taken one yet. I popped the cap and took a pill. Then I looked at the counter next to the sink. My specialised law outlines, my flashcards, the ones I had spent 3 months handwriting, the ones that were colour-coded and essential for my memorisation. I had left them on the dining table earlier because the light was better there. They were gone. Panic surged through me. I ran to the dining room. Empty. I called out. She didn't answer. I walked into the living room. "Evelyn, have you seen my flashcards?" She didn't look away from the TV. "They aren't messy papers." "Well," she said, lazily sipping her tea. "The cleaning lady was here today. I told her to clear the clutter from the dining table. My blood ran cold." Evelyn shrugged. "I assume she threw them out." "Trash." I ran to the garage where we kept the big recycling bins. I tore open the lid. I didn't care about the smell. I didn't care about the grime. I dug through bags of coffee grounds and vegetable peels. And there they were, my future, my law career, my ticket to freedom, soaked in orange juice, torn in half and buried under a pile of wet garbage. I pulled them out, my hands shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't an accident. The cleaning lady hadn't been here today. It was Tuesday. The cleaning lady comes on Thursdays. Evelyn had done this. I stood there in the cold garage, clutching my ruined notes to my chest, breathing in the sour smell of rot. I realised then that she didn't just want to control the house. She wanted to destroy me. She wanted to strip me of my identity until I was nothing but a vessel for her grandchild. I looked towards the door leading back into the house. Through the window, I could see her silhouette in the living room. She was sitting perfectly still, and then I saw her head turn. She was looking towards the garage. She knew I was out here. She knew I was digging through the trash. And I swear, even through the glass in the distance, I could feel her smiling. I cleaned the notes as best as I could. I hid them in my bag. I walked back inside, washed my hands, and went upstairs without saying a word. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the house settle, and I realised something else. If she was willing to throw away my future, what else was she willing to do? I put a hand on my belly. The baby kicked, a small, fluttery movement. "I won't let her win," I whispered into the darkness, but the darkness whispered back. And it said, "You have no idea what you're up against." Because the next morning, I woke up to find the door to my room locked. From the outside, the lock didn't click. It didn't slide. It just held. I stood there in my pyjamas, hand on the brass doorknob, twisting it, left, right, jiggle. Nothing. The heavy oak door of the guest bedroom wouldn't budge. My heart did a double beat. Did the latch stick? It was an old house, after all. Victorian charm often meant faulty hardware. I leaned my shoulder into it and pushed. Still nothing. Then panic, cold and sharp, pricked the back of my neck. I called out. My voice sounded small in the high-ceilinged room. Silence. I checked my phone. 9:15 a.m. Mark had left for work 2 hours ago. I had slept in, exhausted from the night before, from digging through the trash to salvage my law notes. I knocked on the door, louder this time. Evelyn, can you hear me? I pressed my ear against the wood. I could hear the faint hum of the vacuum cleaner downstairs. She was home. She was awake. I hammered my fist against the panel. For 5 minutes, I pounded on that door. The vacuum stopped. I heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate steps. Thump, thump, thump. They stopped right outside the door. I let out a breath of relief. Evelyn, thank God. The knob is jammed. Silence. I saw the shadow of her feet under the door gap. She was standing right there. Oh, Elena, her voice came through the wood, muffled but unmistakably calm. It's not jammed, dear. My blood froze. What? Because you need to rest, she said, her tone sounding like she was explaining bedtime to a toddler. You were so hysterical last night, running into the garage, digging through garbage. It's not healthy behaviour. You're having a breakdown, Elena, I shouted, gripping the knob. Open the door. Shh, she soothed. Lower your voice. Stress raises cortisol levels. I've brought you some breakfast. I'll slide a tray under the door later if you behave. Just stay there. Study your little books. Isn't that what you wanted? Mark is in a very important meeting with the partners today, she said smoothly. His phone is off. And if you call the police, well, imagine how that would look. A pregnant woman, hysterical, off her medication. Oh, wait, you aren't on medication, are you? The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. She wasn't just locking me in. She was setting up a narrative. The crazy hormonal wife. I'm going to the garden now, she said cheerfully. I'll unlock it when I come back for lunch. I heard her footsteps retreat. Thump, thump, thump. Then the front door slammed. I sank to the floor, my back against the locked door. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. This wasn't passive-aggressive anymore. This was imprisonment. I scrambled for my phone. I dialed Mark, voicemail. I dialed again, voicemail. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over my mum's number. But what would I say? But she was 3 states away. She would freak out. She would call the cops. And then, what? Evelyn would open the door, smile and say, "Oh, officer," the latch sticks. I needed proof. I stood up. I paced the room. My eyes darted around the space. The bed, the desk, the window. The window looked out onto the backyard. I moved to the window and looked down. It was a 20-foot drop, no trellis, no escape. But below me, on the patio, Evelyn was sitting. She wasn't gardening. She was sitting at the patio table with a cup of coffee and her phone, and she wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a woman I recognised, Janice, the neighbourhood gossip queen. The window was cracked open, just a sliver to let in fresh air. I knelt on the floor, hidden by the curtains, and pushed it open another inch. The sound drifted up clearly. Honestly, I don't know how Mark does it, Evelyn was saying. She took a sip of her coffee. My jaw dropped. Screaming, I hadn't made a sound last night, while Janice gasped. At me, at the walls, at nothing, Evelyn sighed, shaking her head. She thinks I'm stealing her things. She accused me of throwing away her notes. Can you imagine? It's the hormones, Janice offered. I think it's genetic, Evelyn leaned in, her voice dropping, but the acoustics of the patio carried it straight to my window. Her mother, single mum, never married, worked in a diner. There's a history of instability there. I looked it up. Did you know her mother moved 5 times in 6 years when Elena was a child? Who runs like that? Criminals! I bit my knuckle to stop myself from crying out. My mother moved us because our landlord kept raising the rent. We moved because we were poor, not because we were crazy. And now, Evelyn continued, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. I'm worried she's going to hurt the baby. I found her in the garage last night, digging through trash. She was eating something out of the bin, Janice. I gasped aloud. The lie was so grotesque, so monstrous. It physically hurt. Oh, my God, Janice whispered. I had to lock the guest room door this morning, Evelyn confessed, just for her own safety. I told her the latch was stuck, but I'm scared, Janice. You poor thing. Janice reached out and patted Evelyn's hand. You need to tell Mark. You need to get her committed. I'm working on it, Evelyn said. Her voice changed. It wasn't sad anymore. It was cold, calculated. I'm documenting everything, every outburst, every messy room, every time she neglects Mark. By the time the baby comes, Mark will see the truth. I stumbled back from the window, my legs giving out. I hit the floor hard. She wasn't just trying to annoy me. She wasn't just jealous. She was building a case. She was planning to take my baby. Unfit? That was the legal term. She knew it. She knew I was studying law. She was using my own game against me. She was gaslighting everyone, Mark, the neighbours, probably even the doctors, into thinking I was losing my mind. And when the baby was born, she would step in as the saviour, the stable, wealthy grandmother versus the hysterical, broke and unstable mother. I looked at my phone, I hit record, I crawled back to the window praying they were still talking. Mark is so soft-hearted, Evelyn was saying. He thinks he can fix her, but you can't fix trash, Janice. My finger hovered over the stop button and I had it. Trash. But then I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. The front door opened downstairs. Mum! Mark was home. I scrambled up. I ran to the door. I screamed, Mark! I heard Evelyn's chair scrape against the patio stone. She was running inside. I pounded on the door. She locked me in. I heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. Mark's voice was right outside. I sobbed, open it! I heard the lock click. The door flew open. Mark stood there looking bewildered. He was holding his briefcase. Behind him, breathless and flushed, stood Evelyn. I threw myself into Mark's arms. I was shaking, crying, a mess of snot and tears. She locked me in, Mark. She told Janice I'm crazy. Mark held me tight, but he looked over my shoulder at his mother. Mum! Evelyn stood there. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look angry. She looked devastated. She put a hand to her chest and let out a shaky breath. Oh, Mark, she whispered, her eyes filling with instant tears. Thank God you're home, Mark asked, his voice stern. Evelyn cried. She locked herself in. She's been in there all morning, screaming that I'm trying to kill her. I tried to bring her breakfast, but she wouldn't open the door. Then I pulled back from Mark, staring at her. You liar! Elena, honey, Evelyn stepped forward, her hands open. Why are you doing this? I never said that. Mark, look at her. Look at her eyes. I turned to Mark. Mark, believe me, she was on the patio. She told Janice I was eating trash. I recorded it. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I pulled it out. I tapped the screen. I screamed. I hit play. Silence. Then a hiss of static and then just wind, the sound of birds chirping and very faintly the sound of a lawnmower in the distance, but no voices. I stared at the phone. No, I recorded it. I pressed play again, just wind noise. I realised with a sinking horror the wind was blowing against the microphone. The patio was 20 feet down. The app hadn't picked up the conversation clearly enough. It was just garbled noise. Evelyn sobbed. She's hallucinating voices, Mark. Mark looked at the phone, then he looked at me. His face wasn't angry, it was scared. Elena, he said softly. I screamed, throwing the phone onto the bed. She's lying. Mark, Evelyn said softly, stepping closer to him. Maybe we should call Dr. Evans just for a checkup. Mark looked at his mother, then at me. I saw the doubt. I saw the seed she had planted taking root. He didn't see his wife anymore. He saw a woman on the edge. No doctors, Mark said firmly, but he didn't let go of me. He looked at me with a pity that was worse than anger. Elena, you need to sleep. I'm not crazy, Mark, I whispered. I stopped fighting. I realised in that moment that screaming only proved her point. I know, babe. I know, he soothed, rubbing my back. Just rest, okay? I'll stay here with you. He led me to the bed. Evelyn stood in the doorway. Mark turned to her. Of course, Evelyn whispered. I'll just make some chamomile tea. She turned to leave, but before she did, she caught my eye just for a split second. She didn't smile this time. She just raised one perfectly arched eyebrow. A silent message you missed. I lay down on the bed, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Mark sat beside me, stroking my hair, murmuring reassurances, but I wasn't listening to him. I was thinking about the phone. I was thinking about the wind. And I was thinking about the baby. She had won this round. She had successfully painted me as paranoid. The next step would be medication, then a psych evaluation, then custody. I closed my eyes. Okay, Evelyn, I thought, you want to play dirty? I felt the baby kick, a strong, solid thump. I'm done being the victim. I'm done being the nice daughter-in-law. If you want a villain, I'll show you a villain. I opened my eyes. Mark, I said. My voice was calm, steady. He looked up. I'm sorry, I lied. I think maybe I am just stressed. Mark let out a breath of relief. It's okay. I'll rest, I said, but I asked. For the nursery? Sure, Mark smiled. Get the one with the camera, I said, and the audio recording, the really high-tech one. Mark kissed my forehead. I watched him walk out of the room. A baby monitor. She thought walls had ears. Wait until she sees what technology can do. I wasn't going to record her from a window anymore. I was going to wire this entire house. The war had just begun. And this time, I was going to be the one listening. The blinking red light of the baby monitor was the only thing that helped me sleep. Mark had installed it 2 days ago in the empty room that was destined to be the nursery. It was a top-of-the-line model, the Owli 360, capable of detecting heartbeats, oxygen levels, and most importantly, sound with crystal clear precision. It connected directly to an app on my phone. Mark thought it was for the baby. He thought his wife was just being an overprepared, nesting mother. He didn't know that I had hidden the camera unit not in the crib, but on the top shelf of the bookcase, behind a stuffed teddy bear. And he didn't know that the nursery shared a thin, uninsulated wall with Evelyn's sewing room, her sanctuary, her war room. I spent my days in a strange state of suspended animation. I was playing a role now, the role of the recovering wife. I smiled more. I kept my head down. I pretended that the incident with the locked door was just a misunderstanding. I stopped studying in the common areas, but while my demeanour was calm, my body was screaming because I was starving, literally starving. It started subtly. Evelyn took over the grocery shopping completely. You just rest, Elena. But the fridge became a minefield. It was Thursday night. Mark was late at work trying to close a deal. That meant it was just me and Evelyn for dinner. I walked downstairs at 6:30 p.m. The house smelled incredible. Roast beef, rosemary, garlic. The scent made my mouth water so hard it hurt. My stomach gave a loud, growling protest. Evelyn was at the stove, plating food. Dinner's ready, she said, without turning around. I sat at the table. My place setting was there. I watched as she brought 2 plates to the table. On her plate, 2 thick slices of roast beef, steaming pink in the middle, a mound of fluffy mashed potatoes and glazed carrots. She set my plate down in front of me. I looked down. It was pasta. Penny pasta in a red sauce that had separated, the oil pooling on top in orange slicks. The edges of the pasta looked hard, white and dried out. I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Evelyn sat down and unfolded her napkin. Oh, honey, the roast came out a little rare. I know pregnant women aren't supposed to eat undercooked meat. Listeria, you know. I can eat medium well, I said. She looked at me with mock horror. Don't be silly. Besides, we had that pasta left over from Tuesday. You know how much I hate waste. In this economy? Tuesday, it was Thursday night. That pasta had been sitting in a Tupperware container for 3 days. It looks dry, I said. It's fine, she snapped, slicing into her beef. Just stir it. Don't be a princess, Elena. You're lucky to have a hot meal prepared for you. I looked at her plate. The juice from the beef was running into the potatoes. It looked divine. Then I looked at my bowl. I picked up my fork. I stirred the pasta. It made a squelching sound. The sauce smelled acidic, almost metallic. I took a bite. It was cold in the middle. The texture was rubbery and the sauce tasted like the plastic container it had been stored in. I gagged, just a little. Evelyn looked up, chewing slowly. Her eyes were flat, devoid of empathy. It tastes off, I whispered. It's fine, she said firmly. Eat it. You need the carbs for the baby. Unless the trap. If I refused, I was ungrateful. If I ate it, I risked getting sick. I looked at the camera lens on her phone, which was face down on the table. She wasn't recording, but she was watching. I forced another bite down, then another. She smiled, revealing her teeth. She finished her roast beef, wiping the plate clean with a piece of bread while I choked down 3-day-old leftovers that tasted like neglect. When Mark came home later, he found me in the kitchen, eating a piece of dry toast. Hey, he kissed my cheek. Yeah, I said, my throat burning. He went to the fridge and pulled out the platter of leftover beef. He grabbed a slice with his fingers and ate it cold. Mum makes the best roast. I looked at him. He had no idea that the roast existed for everyone except me. I had pasta, I said. He frowned, chewing. We had pasta on Tuesday. Your mum didn't want it to go to waste, I said. Mark shrugged, grabbing a beer. Yeah, she's old school like that. Depression-era mentality passed down from Grandma. He walked into the living room to watch the game. I stood in the kitchen, the taste of rancid tomato sauce rising in my throat, and I realised I wasn't a family member here. I was the garbage disposal. But the physical hunger was nothing compared to the social starvation. Saturday was the summer kick-off barbecue. Evelyn loved hosting. It was her stage. She invited the neighbours, the church group, and some of Mark's cousins. The backyard was transformed. Fairy lights, expensive catering, which ironically I wasn't allowed to touch during prep, and a cooler full of craft beers. I put on a floral maternity dress. I did my makeup. I wanted to look human. I wanted to look sane. I walked out onto the patio. The chatter was loud. People were laughing. A chorus of voices. Everyone loved a pregnant woman. Evelyn swooped in immediately. She put an arm around my waist, a grip that was a little too tight, her fingers digging into my ribs. Evelyn announced to the circle of women, "Doesn't she look robust? Not glowing, not beautiful, robust, a word you use for cattle, or a sturdy table." Mrs. Gable, the pastor's wife, asked kindly. Before I could answer, Evelyn cut in. "Oh, she's hanging in there," Sir Evelyn sighed, casting a worried look at me. "The mood swings have been challenging, but we're managing." The women nodded sympathetically. The narrative was already set. I was the burden. Mark was the martyr. "I feel fine," I said, trying to keep my smile fixed. The circle went quiet. Evelyn laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Oh, honey," she patted my belly. "Let's not bore everyone with that. Besides, didn't you lose your flashcards again? I think baby brain has taken over completely." The women chuckled, a polite, condescending ripple of laughter. I felt the heat rise up my neck. "I didn't lose them, Evelyn." Evelyn's eyes widened. She looked at Mrs. Gable. She whispered loudly, "Paranoia." She steered me away from the group before I could say another word. "Why don't you go sit in the corner, Elena, by the shade? You look swollen." She deposited me on a lawn chair at the far edge of the patio, away from the food, away from the conversation. I sat there for 2 hours. It was like being behind a glass wall. I watched Mark laughing with his cousins. I watched Evelyn flitting from group to group, refilling wine glasses, touching arms, laughing. She was the queen bee. Every time someone tried to approach me, Evelyn would intercept them. I saw it happen 3 times. A cousin would start walking toward me, and Evelyn would grab their arm, whisper something in their ear, and they would look at me with pity and turn away. She was isolating me in plain sight. Evelyn loved giving gifts. She had small gift bags for the guests, candles for the women, cigars for the men. Mark walked over to me, holding a plate of BBQ ribs. Finally, food. "Hey," he sat on the arm of my chair. "You okay?" "Your mum told me to sit here," I said. "She's just looking out for your feet," Mark said, oblivious. "Hey, mum's handing out gifts." Evelyn was coming toward us, holding a small wrapped box. She was beaming. The entire party stopped to watch. "And for my special girl," Evelyn announced, her voice ringing out. "I know things have been tight for you financially. Coming from your background, I know you didn't have many luxuries." She handed me the box. I took it. It felt light. Someone cheered. I tore the paper. I opened the lid. Inside was a onesie, but it wasn't new. It was yellowed. The fabric was peeled. And right on the front, there was a faint brown stain near the collar. It was a used, dirty onesie. I stared at it. Evelyn clasped her hands together. "I saved it for 30 years. I thought, since you can't afford to buy new clothes right now, and, you know, with your mother unable to contribute." The silence on the patio was deafening. It was a masterstroke. To the men, it looked like a sentimental heirloom. Mark's old clothes. To the women who knew about fabric and stains, it was a slap in the face. It was saying, "You deserve my trash." And the comment about my mother, that was the dagger. Mark looked at the onesie. "Oh, Mum, that's cute." He didn't see the stain. He didn't hear the insult. I looked up at Evelyn. Her eyes were glittering. She was daring me to react. She wanted me to throw it. She wanted me to scream. She wanted the unstable Elena to make an appearance so everyone could see. My hands shook. I wanted to shove that dirty fabric down her throat. But I remembered the baby monitor. I remembered the long game. I forced a smile. It felt like cracking glass. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said. My voice was dead. It's Very generous of you. I'll make sure to wash it. Evelyn's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She hadn't expected compliance. Well, she cleared her throat. Good. She turned back to the guests. I sat there clutching the stained onesie, feeling tears prick my eyes. I felt small. I felt dirty. I felt like the leftover daughter that nobody wanted. I stood up. I'm going to use the restroom, I muttered to Mark. I walked into the house. I walked past the kitchen, past the laughter outside. I went up the stairs. I didn't go to the bathroom. I went to the nursery. I needed to breathe. I needed to get away from her toxic perfume. I walked into the empty room and closed the door. I leaned my head against the cool wall. The wall shared with Evelyn's sewing room. I took out my phone. I opened the Owleye app. I just wanted to check if it was working. I wanted to see the nursery from the camera's perspective to reassure myself that my trap was set. I opened the live feed. The image of the empty crib appeared on my screen in high definition. Then I noticed something. The sound wave on the app was moving. The green bars were jumping up and down. It was picking up audio. But the nursery was empty. I frowned. I turned the volume up on my phone. The sound was muffled, coming through the wall. It was coming from the sewing room next door. Evelyn must have come inside while I was walking upstairs. I held the phone to my ear. Yes, Dr. Harris. Evelyn's voice, crystal clear. My heart stopped. Dr. Harris, that was my OB-GYN. Why was Evelyn talking to my doctor? No, Mark doesn't know yet, Evelyn was saying. Her voice was low, serious. But I'm telling you, as her primary caregiver right now, the behaviour is escalating. The paranoia, the hygiene issues. Pause. Yes, exactly, Evelyn continued. That's why I wanted to ask. When she goes into labour, is there a way to limit visitors, specifically her mother? She was trying to ban my mother from the delivery room. Evelyn's voice dropped even lower. I had to press the phone into my ear canal to hear it. Regarding the papers we discussed, the power of attorney, if Elena is deemed incapacitated during the birth, Mark will sign whatever needs to be signed. We just need to make sure the baby goes home to a stable environment. My knees gave out. I slid down the wall, clutching the phone. Power of attorney, incapacitated. She wasn't just planning to take custody later. She was planning to declare me mentally unfit during the birth. She wanted to take the baby the second he took his first breath. She wanted to cut me out completely. I looked at the phone. I hit the record button on the screen. Keep talking, you witch, I thought. Tears streaming down my face. Keep talking. But then the door handle to the nursery turned. I froze. I hadn't locked it. The door creaked open. Mark wasn't there. It wasn't Mark. It was Evelyn. She stood in the doorway, still holding her phone to her ear. She looked at me sitting on the floor in the dark. She lowered her phone slowly. She said. Her eyes darted to the phone in my hand. The screen was glowing bright. The Owleye app was open. The audio wave was bouncing. She looked at the phone. Then she looked at the bookshelf behind me. She saw the teddy bear. She saw the tiny red light blinking behind its ear. She looked back at me, and for the first time she didn't smile. Her face went completely blank. A mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're spying on me," she whispered. She took a step into the room and closed the door behind her. The lock clicked. I scrambled backward, but my back hit the crib. I was trapped in the nursery with the predator. And this time, Mark wasn't coming to save me. The click of the lock echoed in the nursery like a gunshot. I was pressed against the crib, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise the baby. Evelyn stood by the door, her hand still resting on the knob. The room was dim, illuminated only by the street lights filtering through the blinds and the pale blue glow of my phone screen. She didn't lunge at me. She didn't scream. She didn't try to grab the phone. She just stood there, smooth and statuesque, and let out a low, disappointed sigh. "I expected better from you, Elena," she whispered. Her voice was devoid of the usual sugary coating. It was flat, metallic. "Spying in my house? That's a felony in some states, you know." I stammered, holding the phone up like a shield. "I heard you. You're trying to take my baby." Evelyn tilted her head, a slow, predator-like movement. "I was consulting a professional because I am terrified for my grandchild's safety. And look at you, cowering in the dark, taping a baby monitor behind a teddy bear." "I'm going to show Mark," I hissed, my voice trembling. "I'm going to play this recording for him." Evelyn smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a chess master who sees mate in 3 moves. Go ahead, she challenged softly. Show him. Tell him you bugged his childhood home. Tell him you don't trust his mother. Tell him you've spent your days setting traps instead of studying. Do you really think he's going to hear my voice on that tape? She took a step closer. I shrank back. Mark worships this family, Elena, she murmured. He worships this house. You violate this sanctuary with your little spy games and you won't just lose the argument. She reached out and unlocked the door. Click. Get some sleep, she said, opening the door wide. We have church in the morning and you're going to look presentable. She walked out, leaving me alone in the dark with the blinking red light of the camera I had thought would save me. I didn't play the recording for Mark that night. She was right. I looked at the audio file and I looked at Mark sleeping beside me, exhausted, stressed, innocent Mark, and I knew she had checkmated me. If I played it, she would spin it. She would cry and I would look like the paranoid villain who wiretapped the nursery, so I deleted the file, but I didn't sleep. Sunday morning arrived with a blinding, aggressive sunshine. In this house, Sunday wasn't a day of rest. It was a performance. It was the day Evelyn shined the brightest. It was the day of the masquerade. I came downstairs at 8:15 a.m. My eyes were puffy from crying, my skin pale. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life. Evelyn was already in the foyer, adjusting Mark's tie. She looked immaculate in a navy blue suit, pearls and a hat that looked like a halo. There she is, Evelyn said brightly as I descended the stairs. She turned to me, her face a mask of radiant warmth. Good morning, sleeping beauty. Mark looked up from his phone. Yeah, you look good, babe. Actually, Evelyn interjected, her eyes scanning my outfit, a simple grey dress I had worn a dozen times. That grey washes you out, Elena. It makes you look a bit sickly. Why don't you wear that pink floral one I bought you? I like this dress, I said quietly. Oh, humour an old woman. Evelyn walked over and smoothed my hair, her touch lingering just a second too long near my neck. We're sitting in the front pew today. The Henderson family is visiting. You want to look happy. The subtext was clear. Put on the costume or suffer the consequences. I went upstairs and changed. I put on the pink dress. It was tight around the neck. It felt like a chokehold. The car ride to Grace Community Church was silent. Mark drove. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, humming a hymn. I sat in the back, watching the manicured lawns of suburbia roll by, feeling the bile rise in my throat. When we pulled into the parking lot, the transformation was instantaneous. As soon as Evelyn stepped out of the Lexus, she turned it on. The charm, the magnetism. Oh, look, she waved enthusiastically. She looped her arm through mine. Come on, Elena, stick close to me. She dragged me toward the church entrance like a trophy or a prisoner. Evelyn! A woman in a large hat embraced her. Evelyn laughed, the sound tinkling like wind chimes. Look who I have with me, my beautiful daughter-in-law. Martha cooed, reaching out to touch my stomach. I opened my mouth to speak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say she starves me. She locks me in rooms. She's trying to steal my baby. But Evelyn squeezed my arm hard, her nails dug into the tender flesh of my bicep through the pink fabric. She's doing wonderful, Evelyn answered for me. A little tired, you know how it is. The baby brain is in full swing. She forgets where she is sometimes, poor thing. You're a saint, Evelyn, Martha said. Truly. We moved through the crowd, handshake after handshake, hug after hug. Evelyn was the star of the show and I was her prop. She introduced me to everyone, always with a caveat, always with a subtle dig, disguised as concern. This is Elena. She's studying law, can you believe it? Although we're taking a little break from the books. This is Elena. Yes, she's from the city. Single parent household, you know. It's been a big adjustment for her, joining a family like ours. Every compliment she paid me was backhanded. Every smile she gave me was a warning. We sat in the front pew. The organ music swelled, vibrating through the floorboards. Mark sat on my left, Evelyn on my right. I was hemmed in. The service began. Pastor Dave, a man with a booming voice and a face, started the sermon. I sat there sweating. The air in the church felt thick, heavy with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. I felt dizzy. And now, Pastor Dave said, lowering his voice, we have a time for prayer requests. Hands went up. People asked for prayers for sick aunts, for job interviews, for soldiers overseas. Then I felt movement beside me. Evelyn stood up. The church went quiet. Evelyn was a pillar of this community. When she spoke, people listened. Pastor, Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. It was a masterclass in acting. She sounded brave, yet fragile. She looked down at me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. My head snapped up. Mark looked confused but supportive. Elena is going through a very dark valley right now, Evelyn said, her voice catching. The enemy is attacking her mind. She is struggling with confusion, fear, anger. A gasp rippled through the room. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at the back of my head. She carries the future of our family in her womb, Evelyn said, wiping a tear from her eye. But her spirit is troubled. We fear for her mental peace. We fear that she was doing it. She was doing it right here in front of God and everyone. She was publicly labelling me as mentally unstable. I ask that you pray for her clarity, Evelyn finished, looking at the pastor with pleading eyes. Pray that the demons of paranoia and depression release their hold on her. Amen, the pastor said somberly. Suddenly, dozens of hands were reaching toward me. People from the row behind me laid hands on my shoulders. Evelyn's hand was heavy on my head. Mark put his hand on my back. I felt like I was being buried alive. No, I whispered. Lord, the pastor prayed. We lift up this sister. I said louder. I tried to stand up. Evelyn's hand pushed me down. She wasn't just resting it there. She was pinning me. Relax, honey, she hissed in my ear, too low for anyone else to hear. I shouted. The music stopped. The prayer stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. I stood up, shaking off their hands. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I pointed a trembling finger at Evelyn. She's the one! She's trying to take my baby! She locks me in room. I looked around the church, desperate for one pair of eyes that believed me. I grabbed his arm. Tell them! Mark's face was beet red. He looked horrified. Not at Evelyn, at me. Elena, sit down, he whispered harshly. I turned to the pastor. She told my doctor I was incapacitated. The pastor looked at Evelyn. Evelyn didn't look angry. She looked heartbroken. She covered her mouth with her hand and let out a sob. She wept. Oh, my poor sweet girl, it's the hallucination again. She turned to the congregation, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, everyone. We didn't want it to come to this in public. Please forgive her, I screamed. Two deacons stepped forward from the side of the altar. They looked at Mark. Mark, son, one of them said gently. Maybe you should take her to the car. I backed away. I need help. Come on, Elena. Mark grabbed my arm. His grip was iron. He was humiliated. He was angry. We're leaving. He dragged me out of the pew. Evelyn followed close behind, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting sympathetic pats on the arm from the parishioners we passed. Stay strong, Evelyn, someone whispered. We're praying for you, Evelyn, another said. As we reached the heavy oak doors of the church, I looked back. Hundreds of people were looking at me with pity. They didn't see a victim. They saw a crazy woman screaming at a saint. Evelyn had won the court of public opinion. We burst out into the parking lot. Mark practically threw me into the back seat of the car. He slammed the door shut. He turned on his heel and paced the asphalt, running his hands through his hair. I cannot believe you did that. Evelyn climbed into the front seat. She checked her makeup in the visor mirror. The tears were gone instantly. Well, she said calmly, adjusting her hat. That was unfortunate. Mark exploded, turning on his mother. Mum, she just accused you of abuse in front of the entire town. Evelyn turned to look at Mark. Her expression was solemn. Because now you see, Mark, she said softly. Now you see how bad it really is. We can't ignore it anymore. She's dangerous to herself. Mark stopped pacing. He looked at me through the window. I was sobbing in the back seat, my face buried in my hands. He looked back at his mother. Evelyn reached out and took his hand. We do what's necessary, she said. I have a friend who runs a wellness centre upstate, a place for rest for women with delicate conditions. I think we should drive her there. My head snapped up. Upstate, a wellness centre. She meant a mental institution. Mark asked, his voice wavering. But, Mark, Evelyn said firmly, forget the exam. Damn, look at her. Do you want your son raised by someone who screams in church? Mark looked at me. He looked at the woman he loved. But the woman he loved was screaming about conspiracies. He looked at his mother, the rock, the stability. No, Mark whispered. Then get in the car, Evelyn said. Mark got into the passenger seat. Evelyn moved to the driver's side. I lunged for the door handle, locked. The child lock was on. I screamed, pounding on the glass. Mark, she's taking me away. Evelyn started the engine. She looked at me in the rearview mirror. Her eyes met mine. She winked. As the car pulled out of the church parking lot, heading not toward home but toward the highway, I realised with a terrifying jolt that the masquerade was over. The trap had snapped shut, and I was being taken to a place where no one could hear me scream. The sound of tyres humming against the asphalt was the only thing keeping me from screaming. That and the knowledge that screaming was exactly what she wanted. We had been on Interstate 95 for an hour. The familiar suburbs of our town had long faded, replaced by the dense, towering peaks of upstate New York. The world outside the tinted windows of the Lexus was grey and blurred, rushing past at 70 miles per hour. I was trapped in the back seat. The child locks were engaged. My phone was gone. Evelyn had confiscated it for my own peace of mind before we even left the parking lot. In the driver's seat, Evelyn was humming. It was a soft, melodic tune. Amazing Grace. The irony made my stomach churn. Mark sat in the passenger seat staring out the window. His posture was rigid. He looked like a man whose world had just been shattered, and he was trying to hold the pieces together with silence. "We're making good time," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. Her voice was light, conversational, as if we were heading to a picnic and not a psychiatric facility. "Dr. Thorne said they have a bed ready. It's a lovely room, Elena, overlooking the lake. You'll love it. It's very—" I didn't answer. "Serenity is what you need," she continued, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "No phones, no internet, no stress, just you and the bee. And the doctors, of course. Medication, that was the next step. Chemical restraints. They would drug me until I was a drooling zombie, compliant and quiet. While she took over the legal guardianship of my child, I looked at the back of Mark's head. Mark. My husband. The man who used to make me grilled cheese sandwiches at 2 a.m. when I was studying. The man who cried when we saw the first ultrasound. How had he become this stranger? He was a good man. That was the problem. He was good and he trusted the people he loved. He had spent 30 years trusting his mother. She had groomed him for this moment his entire life, to believe that she was the ultimate authority on what was best for the family. I realised then that begging wouldn't work, yelling wouldn't work. I had to break the spell. And to break a spell that deep, you don't use a hammer, you use a needle. I took a deep breath. I stopped crying. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I sat up straight. And I went silent. I stared directly at the back of Evelyn's head. I focused all my energy, all my rage, into a laser beam of silence. 10 minutes passed. Evelyn adjusted the rearview mirror. She caught my eye. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I just stared. She shifted in her seat. She asked. Mark reached into the cooler bag at his feet and handed her a bottle. Mark asked, his voice hoarse. He turned to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked guilty. I looked at him. I held his gaze. I didn't say a word. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just looked at him with a profound, terrifying calmness. Mark flinched. He turned back around. She's catatonic now, Evelyn whispered to Mark. See the mood swings, manic in the church, depressive now. Just drive, Mum, Mark muttered. I am driving, sweetie. We needed gas. I watched the fuel gauge on the dashboard. It was hovering near empty. Evelyn was so focused on her victory lap that she hadn't noticed. Mum, you're on E, Mark said. Oh, goodness, Evelyn laughed. Distracted. There's a rest stop up ahead. My heart gave a single hard thump. This is here, the only chance. The rest stop was one of those desolate concrete islands off the highway. A gas station, a vending machine building, and a lot of empty space. Evelyn pulled up to the pump. She turned off the engine. I need to use the ladies' room, Evelyn announced. She pulled the keys out of the ignition. She turned to Mark. Fill it up, will you? And Mark, don't open the back door. She might run. I know, Mum, Mark sighed. He got out of the car. Evelyn looked at me one last time and behave, she hissed. Then she got out, locking the car with the fob. Beep, she walked toward the building, her heels clicking on the pavement. I was alone in the car. Mark was standing right outside my window, swiping his credit card at the pump. The car was off, the windows were up, and it was getting hot. I looked at Mark. He was staring at the numbers on the pump, lost in thought. I tapped on the glass, gently, tap, tap. Mark looked up. He saw me. He saw his wife. Not the monster Evelyn had painted, just Elena. He hesitated. Then he looked toward the building where Evelyn had disappeared. The coast was clear. He leaned in close to the glass. I can't let you out, Elena, Mum said. I pressed my face to the glass. I mouthed the words exaggerated and slow. I need air. Mark looked pained. I pointed to my stomach, then I pointed to my throat. I feigned a gag. I'm going to throw up. Mark panicked. He didn't want vomit all over his dad's Lexus leather seats. He looked at the building again. Then he reached for the handle. He didn't open the door. He just cracked it. The window rolled down automatically a few inches when the door seal broke. Just breathe, Mark whispered urgently through the crack. Don't scream. I put my mouth close to the opening. I could smell the gasoline fumes. I could smell his cologne. Mark, I whispered. My voice was steady, eerie. Okay, he exhaled. I just have one question, I whispered. Just one. Mark frowned. I paused, letting the words hang in the hot air. I leaned closer. Mark froze. The gas pump clicked off, he whispered. My blue suitcase, my safe, I said. The one from the closet. Check the trunk, Mark. If she packed it this morning before church, but then she planned this. Oh, Mark stared at me. His brain was trying to process the logic. Evelyn had said we should drive her there, as if it were a sudden idea, a reaction to my outburst. But if the bag was there, she wouldn't. Mark shook his head. There wasn't time, I said softly. Check, please? Mark stared at me for another second. Then he pulled the nozzle out of the car. He racked it. He walked to the back of the car. I twisted in my seat to watch through the rear window. Mark stood at the trunk. He looked toward the building. Evelyn wasn't back yet. He popped the trunk. The lid rose. I couldn't see inside, but I saw Mark's face. His jaw went slack. He stood there for a long moment, staring down. Then he reached in. He pulled out my blue suitcase. And then he pulled out something else. His own duffel bag. She had packed for him too. She had planned for him to stay at a hotel nearby while I was committed. Mark slammed the trunk shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot across the empty parking lot. He walked back to my window. His face was pale. The look of blind trust was gone, replaced by a flickering shadow of doubt. She packed it, he whispered. Everything. She knew, Mark, I said, pressing my advantage. She spoke to Dr. Aris yesterday. She told Janice on Friday. We both jumped. Evelyn was walking back from the building holding 2 bottles of water. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting between Mark and the slightly open car door. She called out, her pace quickening. She felt sick, Mark said. His voice was different now, tighter. Evelyn reached the car. She pushed Mark aside gently but firmly and slammed the door shut. Well, turn on the AC then. She beeped the locks again. She looked at Mark. You look pale, sweetie. Mark looked at his mother. He looked at the keys in her hand. Yeah, he lied. Let's get back on the road, Evelyn chirped. She got into the driver's seat. Mark got into the passenger seat. The car started. We merged back onto the highway. But the energy in the car had shifted. Mark wasn't looking out the window anymore. He was looking at Evelyn. He was watching her hands on the steering wheel. He was watching her smile, and I knew that the seed of doubt had been planted. But a seed wasn't enough. We were still moving at 70 miles per hour toward a prison. I needed to stop this car. I needed to force a detour. I needed to weaponize the one thing Evelyn pretended to care about, the baby. I let out a low moan. It started in my throat, a guttural sound of pain. Evelyn glanced back. Ignore her, Mark. I doubled over, clutching my stomach. I kicked the back of Mark's seat hard. I gasped. Oh, God. Mark turned around. I screamed. I let the panic take over. I channeled every ounce of fear I had into my voice. Something is wrong. She's faking, Evelyn said calmly. She didn't even tap the brakes. Don't fall for it, Mark. It's a manipulation tactic. I screamed. I wasn't, but they couldn't see that. Mark, please, it feels like... I started hyperventilating. I let out a shriek that tore at my own throat. Mark turned to Evelyn. No, Evelyn said, her knuckles white on the wheel. We are almost there, Mark shouted. She says she's bleeding, Evelyn snapped. Her mask slipped completely. Her face contorted into a snarl. Can't you see what she's doing? She's trying to control you, I screamed, gripping my stomach. Mark, the baby is coming. I saw the sign for the exit approaching. 1 mile. Mark grabbed the dashboard. Evelyn yelled. She pressed the gas pedal harder. The car surged forward. 80 miles per hour. I sobbed. Please. That was the trigger. Mark didn't argue. He didn't beg. He reached over and grabbed the steering wheel. Evelyn shrieked. Mark yelled. He yanked the wheel to the right. The Lexus swerved violently. Horns blared around us. A semi-truck slammed on its brakes. The sound of air horns deafening. The car skidded across 2 lanes, tyres screeching. smoke rising from the asphalt. Evelyn slammed on the brakes, fighting for control, but Mark held the wheel firm toward the exit ramp. We careened off the highway, flying down the off-ramp at dangerous speed. Evelyn managed to regain control just before we hit the guardrail, bringing the car to a shuddering halt on the shoulder of the exit ramp. Silence. Heavy, terrified silence. The smell of burnt rubber filled the car. Mark was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He was staring at his mother. Evelyn was staring straight ahead, her hands shaking on the wheel. She looked terrified, not of the crash, but of the loss of control. "You could have killed us," Evelyn whispered. "You weren't stopping," Mark said. His voice was shaking. Evelyn screamed, slamming her hands on the steering wheel. She turned to look at me, her eyes wild. "Tell him!" I stayed curled in a ball, whimpering. "Mark, hospital." Mark looked at Evelyn. He looked at the exit sign. "St. Jude's Medical Centre. 2 miles." "Get out," Mark said to Evelyn. Evelyn froze. "Get out of the driver's seat," Mark said. His voice was low, dangerous. "Mark, you are making a mistake. Once she gets into a regular hospital, she'll spin her stories." Mark roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him yell at her. It was a primal sound. Evelyn flinched. She looked at Mark, shocked by his defiance. She looked at the traffic passing by. She realised she had no choice. She opened her door. She got out. Mark got out. They switched places. Mark got into the driver's seat. He looked in the rearview mirror. His eyes met mine. "Hang on, Elena," he said. He floored it. As we sped toward the hospital, leaving Evelyn fuming in the passenger seat, I allowed myself a tiny, secret breath of relief. I wasn't bleeding. My water hadn't broken, but I had broken the chain of command. We arrived at the emergency room entrance. Mark pulled up to the curb. He jumped out and ran to the back door. He pulled me out of the car. He yelled at a nurse standing by with a wheelchair. "My wife is pregnant!" I slumped into the wheelchair, letting my head loll back. Evelyn was getting out of the car now, fixing her hair, composing herself. She was already planning her next move. She would tell the doctors I was hysterical. She would show them her power of attorney if she had forged it. But as the nurse wheeled me through the automatic sliding doors, away from the heat of the day and into the sterile, cool air of the hospital, I grabbed the nurse's arm. Mark was parking the car. Evelyn was following him. I had 10 seconds alone with the medical staff. I pulled the nurse close. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling with real fear now. The nurse stopped. She looked down at me. She was a middle-aged woman with kind, sharp eyes. "I've got you, honey." "My mother-in-law," I whispered, tears leaking from my eyes. "She's trying to hurt me." It was a lie. Evelyn didn't have a gun. But in America, that is the one word that stops everything. That is the magic word that brings security, police, and lockdown. The nurse's eyes went wide. She looked back at the glass doors where Evelyn was approaching and she turned to the orderly. "Code silver," she said calmly. "Call security. Lock the triage doors." They wheeled me rapidly around the corner behind the double doors of the trauma unit. I heard the heavy magnetic locks click shut behind me. Thud click. I closed my eyes. I was safe for now. But outside those doors, the war had just gone nuclear. And when Mark walked in, I had to make sure he chose the right side. Because if he didn't, I was never leaving this hospital with my baby. Code silver. Emergency room. The voice over the hospital intercom was robotic, calm and terrifying. I was sitting on the edge of a gurney in Trauma Room 4. The heavy magnetic doors had sealed shut with a mechanical thud. I was shivering, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. I had just committed a crime. I had filed a false police report. I had told the nurse that a prominent community member had a gun. But as I looked at the bruises forming on my arm, finger marks where Evelyn had gripped me in the church, I knew it wasn't a lie. Not really. She didn't have a pistol, but she had a weapon. She had power, money and a plan to erase my existence. Through the small glass window of the trauma room, I saw the chaos unfold in the hallway. It was like a scene from a movie, played in slow motion. 2 uniformed police officers sprinted past. Then I saw them stop. I saw Mark, hands raised in the air, looking bewildered. And then I saw Evelyn. She was standing near the triage desk, clutching her pearls, screaming at a security guard. "This is ridiculous. I am Evelyn Whitmore." The officer didn't care about her husband. Ma'am, get on the ground. I watched, holding my breath, as the woman who had terrorised me for months, the woman who sat on a throne of judgment, was forced to her knees on the dirty hospital linoleum. She shrieked, "Mark, tell them!" An officer grabbed her wrists. He pulled them behind her back. Click. The silver handcuffs glinted under the fluorescent lights. A tear slid down my cheek. It wasn't sadness, it was relief so profound it felt like oxygen. The door to my room opened. A doctor walked in, followed by the nurse I had whispered to. The doctor looked serious. "Mrs. he asked. I'm Dr. Lou. We've secured the area. The police are searching your mother-in-law. Are you hurt?" I looked at the doctor. This was the moment the gun lie would fall apart in 5 minutes when they didn't find one. I had to pivot. I had to tell the truth so raw that the lie didn't matter. "She doesn't have a gun," I whispered. The doctor froze. The nurse's face hardened. "She doesn't have a gun," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Honey, this is serious," the nurse warned. "I lied because she was kidnapping me," I said, looking at Lou dead in the eye. She was driving me to a psychiatric facility against my will. She has been starving me. She locked me in a room. She was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could take my baby. If I didn't say she had a gun, she would have taken me out of here. I pulled up the sleeve of my dress. I showed them the thinness of my arm. I showed them the bruise. "Check her purse," I said, my voice trembling. "Not for a gun. Look for papers. Look for the power of attorney documents. She carries them with her." Dr. Lou looked at my arm. He looked at the desperation in my eyes. He was a medical professional. He knew the difference between a psychotic break and a terrified victim. "Stay here," Dr. Lou said. He walked out. 10 minutes, it felt like 10 years. I sat in the room listening to the muffled shouting outside. Then the door opened again. It was Mark. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, probably from the scuffle when the police arrived. His face was grey. A police officer stood behind him. Mark walked into the room and stopped. He didn't come to the bed. He just stood by the door, staring at me. "She doesn't have a gun, Elena," Mark said. His voice was hollow. They searched her. They searched the car. "I know," I said softly. "They are releasing her," Mark said. "They are going to charge you with filing a false report. She is furious. She says this proves everything." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Why did you do it?" I asked. Mark frowned. Mark shook his head. "They were looking for weapons, Elena." "Check her bag," I pleaded. "Mark, please, just one last time. If I'm crazy, if I'm the villain, then prove it. Go out there, take her purse and look for the file folder. If it's not there, bitch, I'll go to the institution. I'll sign myself in." Mark stared at me. He was vibrating with conflict. The indoctrination of his mother was fighting against the love for his wife. "One last time," I whispered. Mark turned around. He walked out past the police officer. I waited. I could hear Evelyn's voice down the hall. She was out of cuffs now. She was shouting, "I want her arrested. She is a menace. Mark, get the car." Then silence. The shouting stopped. 1 minute passed. 2. Then I heard a sound that I will never forget. It was a scream. But it wasn't me, and it wasn't Evelyn. It was Mark. It was a cry of pure, agonising betrayal. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Mark burst into the room. He was clutching a thick manila envelope. His hands were shaking so violently the papers were rattling. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, blown open by shock. "She had it," he whispered. He threw the papers onto the bed. I looked down. Involuntary commitment order, Willow Creek facility, power of attorney, transfer of custody, pre-drafted divorce decree. It was all there. The dates were filled in. Today's date. She hadn't just planned to commit me. She had planned to divorce us. She had planned to take the baby and erase me legally, medically, and financially. "She had it in her purse," Mark choked out. He fell to his knees beside the bed. He buried his face in my lap. He began to sob, deep, racking sobs that shook his entire body. "I didn't know," he cried. "Elena, I swear to God, I didn't know." I put my hand on his head. The door opened. Evelyn stood there. She looked dishevelled. Her hat was gone. Her hair was messy. But her eyes, they were cold, dead. She saw Mark on his knees. She saw the papers on the bed. She didn't apologise. She didn't cry. She straightened her jacket. She lifted her chin. "He would have been better off without you," she said. Her voice was ice. "You are weak. You are poor. You come from nothing." Mark stood up. He turned to face his mother. He wiped the tears from his face. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard rage I'd never seen in him. Get out, Mark said. Mark, be reasonable, Evelyn stepped forward. I did this for the family. Mark shouted. The sound echoed off the sterile walls. You aren't a mother. Well, you need me, Evelyn sneered. Who paid for your college? Who paid for the wedding? Who is going to pay for this house? Mark walked over to her. He towered over her. Then I'll be nothing, he said. But he turned to the police officer standing in the hallway. So? I'd like to file a restraining order, Mark said, pointing at his mother. Against this woman, for myself. Evelyn's mouth dropped open. For the first time, the mask shattered completely. Fear, real fear, crept into her eyes. She was losing her possession. And Mark interrupted, his voice shaking with fury. She has been illegally recording my wife. She has been drugging her food. He didn't know that for sure, but he was guessing now, and he was probably right. I want her removed from the hospital. The officer stepped forward. Evelyn screamed as the officer took her arm. You can't do this to me. I made you. Mark! Mark slammed the door in her face. We heard her screaming all the way down the hall. Ungrateful! Trash! Then the elevator dinged. The doors closed and she was gone. 6 months later, the apartment is small. It's a 2-bedroom walk-up in the city, miles away from the manicured lawns of Connecticut. The paint is peeling a little in the corner and we can hear the sirens from the street below, but to me it's a palace because it's quiet. There are no whispers in the vents, no hidden cameras, no passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. I am sitting on the couch, nursing Leo. He's 3 months old. He has Mark's eyes and my chin. Mark is in the kitchen, making dinner. He burns the toast sometimes, but he's learning. He hasn't spoken to his mother since that day in the hospital. She sends letters. Lawyers send threats about the money Mark owes her. We burn them. It hasn't been easy. We are broke. We are tired. The bar exam was delayed, but I'm taking it next month. But we're free. Mark walks into the room holding 2 plates of spaghetti. It's not fancy. He sits beside me. He kisses Leo's head, then he kisses mine. Farsi, Mark asks. He's perfect, I say. I look at the baby monitor sitting on the coffee table. It's a basic one, audio only, no Wi-Fi, no recording. I reach out and turn it off. We don't need it, I say. And Mark smiles. He puts his arm around me. I look out the window at the city lights. I think about the golden cage I escaped. I think about the woman who tried to rewrite my reality. She wanted a perfect family. She wanted a silent doll. Instead, she got a lawyer. And as I look down at my son safe in my arms, I know one thing for sure. The leftover daughter didn't just survive. She won.